Welcome to Barnaby's podcast, Eye of the Beholder. Barnaby's is one of the leading search engines for art, design, antiques and collectibles from over 3,000 auction houses worldwide. We aim to make the art and auction market more transparent and accessible to everyone, from beginners to collectors and professionals. In today's episode, we meet Max Brownawell, specialist of handbags and accessories at Sotheby's. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So you worked as a handbag specialist, first at Heritage Auctions and now Sotheby's, which means you watched this market for a while, I guess. What have you noticed about the luxury handbags market over the last few years?
Well, when I started at Heritage Auctions, this was around 2014. And back then, the market was totally dominated by the 35 centimeter Birkin. And that was really what everybody wanted. It was what was commanding the highest prices. And a couple of years later, around 2015, 2016, trends totally shifted towards smaller bags. And the Birkin 25 is now far more valuable, in some cases selling for 3 times what the 35 centimeter Birkin would go for. And, that's just a huge sea change since the 35 really was the dominant style since the Birkin's inception in 1984 and completely dominated the secondary market for decades. And so, this past year, we've seen prices for the 35s coming back up a little bit, but they're still averaging less than half of what the smaller sizes are bringing. So that's really been the main change that I've seen over the last 10 years. That and, of course, the increase in value of rare vintage styles. These used to be more niche collectibles that only serious collectors had interest in. And as the market grows, you see more and more handbag collectors that are, willing to pay top dollar for something that's rare and vintage. For example, the metallic collection from 2004 to 2006 that was released along with the Athens Olympics. Pristine examples from that group used to sell, 15 or so years ago in the $20,000 to $30,000 range. Now they're going for $100,000, $150,000. So the market has really opened up a new level of top collectors, in the past decade as well.
But if we go back to the sizes that you were talking about, the Birkin bag, how come the shift of the sizes, the popularity of the sizes?
I think that has a lot to do with fashion trends. Around that time, a lot of miniature bags came out on different runways in Fashion Week. And then a lot of brands started producing smaller bags and miniature bags for years following that. And, that shift in trends was reflected in the Hermès market. And I think, again, we're seeing more large bags come onto the fashion runways. And that's probably what's driving an increase in the price for the 35s today.
Hermès bags sell obviously on the secondhand market for exponentially more than they do in a store. Why are Hermès bags becoming so popular in the secondhand market if you compare to other bags?
So the demand for these really comes from Hermès' distribution strategy and their production standards. So even though Hermès is opening new production facilities and hiring new artisans, it takes a few years for them to train these artisans before they can start producing bags. And each bag is made of the highest quality leather. The leather is cut by a highly skilled leather cutter, and then the entire bag is assembled by one person. So even though they're expanding their production capabilities, they're still not able to produce as many bags as people would like to buy at the retail prices, which today a leather Birkin or a Kelly is going to retail somewhere between 10 and 14,000. And in a store fresh condition on the secondary market, that same bag is going to sell anywhere for 20 to 30,000. And what drives that difference in value is also the amount of other stuff clients have to buy at Hermès to be offered Birkins and Kellys. So there's sort of a game that goes on where the sales associate at Hermès is going to want to sell you things from other categories, homewares, clothing, shoes, jewelry, and get sort of a proof that you're a loyal Hermès customer and that you're not just here to buy a Birkin and sell it and make a quick profit. And if you are looking for a Birkin and you don't want to go through all of those hoops and spend money on other things, you can just pay a markup and buy it on the secondary market and get it immediately.
So it's the foundation of a market, right? With supply and demand, I guess.
Right, exactly.
What specific Hermes bags are most requested, would you say? And why?
Well, the most popular ones are what we would call starter Birkins. If you're coming into this market and you're buying your first Birkin, maybe it's going to be your only Birkin. You want it to be something that's very practical and very timeless, and something that's going to work with a lot of different outfits, that's going to be very usable. And these days, that's generally a 25 centimeter Birkin in Togo leather in either black, gold, or brown or a gray color. Those neutrals, there's always demand for those, and there's always demand for black leather bags with gold hardware, since that's really the classic combination. Hermes has been producing black bags with gold hardware for over 100 years. And so that's, if you're coming into the market, which we're seeing a lot of new clients come in and wanting to buy their first bag, that's generally what people are looking for.
Did they continuously doing it for 100 years, or is that like a retro model that they were start producing again?
So certain models have been in continuous production. The Bolide, for example, which has a zippered closer over the top. It was actually the first handbag to be produced with a zipper back in 1923. And this year would be the 100th anniversary of that design, which I believe Hermes has been producing that continuously. You can find Bolides from every decade going all the way back to the 20s. Something like the Hermès Kelly, for example, that design has roots that go back close to 100 years as well. Although back then it was called something different, and there were some differences in design, but the basic elements of the Kelly bag have been in production as well for about 100 years now.
Do you think the hype will continue for Hermes bags? I mean, obviously you say now that some models of the bags are turning 100 years, so I guess that's also a way to make more hype. But do you think it will continue over time?
I think that's a really good question. I think hype is an interesting word because there's definitely going to be demand for these bags continuing into the future. There's really no other brand that comes close or that competes with them on the secondary market, or even in terms of quality and that desirability factor. Bags that are being handmade by independent artisans, of course, can sometimes surpass Hermes bags when it comes to quality, but the demand for those on the secondary market just isn't there. And so I think, there's definitely going to be hype whenever new colors and new styles, limited editions are released. For example, this past year, they released something called the Kelly en Desordre, which is a new design that's sort of funky and off kilter. And we've seen a huge demand for that design over the last few months. But I expect in the next year or so, as more examples come onto the secondary market, that demand will begin to ebb a bit. And, that cycle of demand for the latest colors and styles is definitely going to continue. And then I think the overall demand for the classic Birkins and the Kellys is going to continue to grow as more people enter the market.
But also you were saying that in the beginning that they do it still with great quality and great quality of the material, which also limits them of the amount of bags they do. Did they ever talk about producing more?
I think because Hermes is a family-owned company, they, can really follow their heritage and say, that they are interested in producing more, but they're not interested in compromising on quality. And so that comes with a really high level of investing in new facilities and new hires. And like I said, years of training for new artisans. So, while they are producing more, and if you go back and look at vintage models, there are physically far fewer of those in existence than some of the newer limited editions. That is something that they're looking to do, I would say, but not, something that they're willing to compromise quality for.
Royals and celebrities have been very important for the branding for Hermes. For example, Grace Kelly, who gave the name of the Kelly bag from the 1950s, after carrying it is to disguise a pregnancy. Who is the fashion brand's most important ambassador today?
Hermes and celebrities, it's an interesting relationship because they don't gift bags to people like other brands do. So if you see a celebrity carrying a Birkin or a Kelly in all likelihood, they paid for it themselves. They may have even bought it on the secondary market. The celebrities that have the most prominent collections, I would say, are the Kardashians and the Jenners. Kris and Kylie Jenner and Kim and Khloe Kardashian in particular have very large collections. And whenever we see them, carrying one of an interesting or a rare bag on an episode of their show, or they're photographed, carrying something, we will typically see a handful of people inquiring about getting a similar bag. And whenever they post videos showing their closets, you get articles dissecting everything that's in the background and what they have and how much it's worth. And so I think that they probably do hold the biggest amount of influence over the market. Of course, the Asian market for these bags is very large, and I'm just not as tuned into that side of the pop culture. So I couldn't really speak to individuals on that side of the world that have influence. But in America and Europe and the Middle East, definitely the Kardashians and Jenners are closely watched.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to start buying luxury bags at auction?
So the obvious advice would be to buy what you love. If you see something, in an auction that really gets your heart racing, that really interests you, you should contact the auction house. You should register to bid. You should ask about condition, since condition can be quite variable on the secondary market. And since auctions are very final, there's no returns. You really want to make sure that you know what you're bidding on. So if you can arrange to see it in person, make an appointment with the auction house, that's going to be best. And then you're going to have a really good understanding of what you're bidding on. Of course, the benefit of bidding at auction is that things often start at pretty low prices. So there's a chance that you could be the only person bidding and that you could get a wonderful deal. And it's very exciting. But then there's also the rush of competition of bidding against somebody. And when you buy something at auction, you don't just buy it, you win it. And the excitement that comes along with that, I think, is very fun. Personally, I have a lot of fun bidding at auctions, and I would recommend that everybody try it.
But also, you just regret what you don't buy, right?
Oh, exactly.
And you can feel that that could almost be stressful during an auction, right? Because you know that.
Oh, definitely. No, whenever I'm bidding, my heart is just racing. And while it's very exciting to win something, it can be a little disheartening to lose, because that's the other side of the coin. When somebody wins, somebody else loses.
But are the collectors of handbags, you mentioned some like Kardashians, but are there both men and women, or is it just female?
No, there's definitely male and female collectors. What's really interesting and unique about this market is that it's dominated by female collectors, and no other market really is. Even the jewelry market is still primarily male buyers. And so while most of the big collectors are female, you do see some high-profile male collectors like Drake or like Floyd Mayweather, who have collections of big exotic bags and things like that. And then you also get men who are interested in collecting these for investment purposes, and that are interested in acquiring, examples of the finest bags and then just keeping them for a few years and reselling them.
We talked about Hermès now, but what about the other brand? Is it just Hermès, or you have other bags that are almost the same, price point?
Not really. Hermès pretty much dominates this market. The number 2 brand I would say is Chanel, but that, the secondary market for Chanel runs in the sort of $2,000 to $10,000 range. And so it's on a different price point, and there's a lot more volume of product from Chanel that's being produced and that's being sold and that's coming onto the market. So it's a different type of collecting, but really there isn't a big competitor for Hermès in the retail side of things or on the secondary market. Even though their retail prices are very reasonable compared to their secondary market prices, they're still a lot higher than most, if not all, other brands. Leather bag, that costs between $10,000 and $14,000 is not common.
And what about fakes then? Because as soon as something is getting valuable, you can be sure in the secondary market that someone would try to fake it, right?
Oh, surely, yeah. And fakes get better and better every year. When I started in this business, there were some of what we call super fakes, which are, basically produced of the same materials and to the same quality as Hermès bags. And there might just be some tiny details that very experienced experts, can notice and recognize. But when you're sourcing bags regularly and selling them, knowing who you're getting the bags from, where they're getting their bags from, having strong relationships with primary Hermès retail clients is, really one of the best ways to go about it. If you're getting bags from people you don't know, that's where you're really setting yourself up, in a risky situation. And today, a lot of the fake bags that we're seeing are getting better and better, and they're having, higher qualities of production, higher qualities of materials, and you really have to drill down on the tiny details to make sure that the things that you are selling are what you say they are.
So how important is the provenance when it comes to, first of all, the end price, the value of the items, but also to make sure it is not a fake?
So provenance, in terms of authenticity, can be important if you have a receipt from when something was purchased from the store and you can verify that that's an authentic receipt, because of course receipts can be faked as well. That can be helpful, especially if it's from somebody that you know. But when bags are sold on the secondary market, their previous owners are kept anonymous for the most part. And the only provenance that adds value to a bag is whether it was Jane Birkin's Birkin or Grace Kelly's Kelly.
And that's kind of holy grail in the handbag market, I guess.
Yes, that's very rare. I don't think I've actually seen any of Grace Kelly's Kellys come onto the market, probably because they're owned by the royal family of Monaco and they don't need to sell anything. But Jane Birkin does regularly sell her bags. She carries one at a time, beats it up, and then sells it for charity. And I think that's her, that's how she goes about it.
That's a good thing to do. You're also an artist. For example, you hand-painted bespoke Hermès bags with MaxPaintsBags. And your design have been spotted on the Kardashians, for example. So how did you decide to start painting Hermès bags?
I first started painting on a bag of my own. I had an idea to do a design inspired by some Tibetan tiger carpets that I had seen. And when I carried that bag, I was working at Heritage Auctions at the time. My colleagues and my clients, they just loved it. People on the street would stop and ask about it, and people would ask me if I would paint on their bags as well. And so that's what got the ball rolling. After doing it part-time for about a year, I left Heritage to start MaxPaintsBags and commit full-time to my painting practice. And that's when I was really able to expand the range of designs that I was doing and the range of clients that I was working with. In terms of the bags that are in the various Kardashian Jenner collections, most of the ones that I sell are sold through dealers or auction houses, so I don't actually know who buys them. And one of those bags, I was just watching a new episode of the Kardashians, and there it was, and I thought, oh my goodness, I had no idea that that Khloe owned that one, and then later I found out she owned some other ones, and that Kylie had a few as well. So that was a fun surprise.
Well, that's confirmation for what you did, huh?
Yes.
But do you see them if you're walking on the street in New York? You can see them.
I haven't seen any of my bags out in the wild. I've had people in airports send me pictures of someone they've noticed walking around with them.
Oh, yeah.
And I've had them show up in street style publications as well. I think there was one in the New Yorker a few years ago in a street style shot. But that's always very exciting when I get to see them come back.
But do you do it still?
Yeah, I still paint on bags. I don't do any on commission anymore. It used to be about 50-50 my business commission versus painting on bags that I owned. But now I just exclusively do it on the bags that I own, which I think allows for a bit more creativity. And I can do some more, exciting designs that really speak to me and hopefully to my clients as well.
But what about, if it's an old furniture, for example, you're kind of not allowed to paint it because then the value drop. But if you take a Hermès bag and paint on it, what would you say about the value?
Oh, yeah, well, that definitely depends. Some value in old furniture can be in the wear and in the age and patina. But generally, those condition issues would reduce the value of a bag, and then painting over them brings it back up. So the bags that I'm buying tend to be bags with condition issues that are being sold at the lower side of the market. And then, once they've been painted and transformed into a work of art, then they tend to sell on the high end of the market. But of course, it's a personal preference. So a lot of the painting that other people do on bags is personalization, people's initials or a portrait of their pet or something like that, which can really hurt a bag's value on the secondary market. But when it's a bit more transformative and artistic, I've seen bags that I've painted for people that they've then resold for multiples of what they bought it from me from. So, I've seen the value of certain ones, I would say really good ones, my masterpieces, if you would be so bold as to call them that, go up substantially. But then it does pose an interesting question. If you took a store fresh Hermès Birkin and you painted it, would it be worth more or less? And I think it's a personal preference. Again, it depends on the design. But I have had clients that have basically bought bags and then given them straight to me to paint because they wanted something that was, painted on a bag that had no condition issues.
And also, I mean, then it's really a personal bag. It's one of a kind.
Right, exactly.
But your designs are often inspired by classic prints like paisley and camouflage, as well as works of famous artists, including, for example, Hilma Klint and Victor Vasarely. Where do you get your inspiration? Is it art books? Is it paintings that you see on the wall at Sotheby's?
It's all of that. Yeah, I've got a large number of art books. I'm constantly scrolling through artists' Instagram pages and going to galleries and museums. And when it comes time to paint a bag, first what I start with is the bag itself, because the particulars of it, whether it's a red Birkin 30 or a white Kelly 32, that's going to determine what design works best. There's the design of the bag itself is the frame and the canvas, and it can't be denied and it can't be covered up. It's the primary aspect that drives the decision making for what design is going to go on the bag. And so once you start with that, you can start to scroll through the inspirations that you've saved and start narrowing things down to a few key images that you're going to work off of. And I think keeping the inspiration pretty tight, working off of one or two pieces of inspiration to develop your design, makes the connection clear with the viewer and a bit more visceral. I think once you get too many aspects of inspiration involved, then you can end up with a design that's a little muddy and complicated and doesn't read in quite as powerful a way as something that's more of a simple combination.
You mentioned the Asian market before, that it has been very strong lately. Which market is the strongest? Is it Asian or is it American or European market?
I would say they're different. The market in the US for larger bags like 35s and 30s is stronger than it is in Asia, where the trend is still very much focused on mini bags and the 20s and the 25s. So, I think that's something that's variable by location, but it is a pretty global market, especially for leather bags, which can be shipped internationally very easily. When it comes up to the higher end, to exotic skins, there's restrictions around shipping those. So those markets can be a bit more local. And, there's a bit more of a demand for our mini exotics in Asia versus in America. The demand for exotics does tend to skew towards larger bags.
Do you have any secrets? I mean, as expert artist and seller of Hermès bags, what is one insight you can give the listeners into the world of Hermès and the market that they might don't know about?
That's a great question. I would say, an interesting thing to think about when you're thinking about this market is that it's totally driven by who wants to buy what and when. If there isn't somebody out there who's looking to buy a bag at a certain time, then it's not going to sell. And if there's two people that don't have any budget and they both want the same bag, it could sell for an insane amount. But if it comes up the next time and there's only one person, the loser from the last one, who is interested in it, then the price could be far, far lower. And that doesn't necessarily indicate a difference in value per se. It's just, those two numbers are going to be how we average our evaluation of similar bags going forward. But it's very different from, say, the diamond market, where you can enter various aspects into a calculator and it'll tell you exactly how much something's worth. It's a lot more driven by demand and emotions and who's looking for what when.
It's definitely true, and I think that's something you should remember when looking into the market prices, because a lot of times we say auction prices is the true market price, but it actually depends if everyone is there, so to speak.
Right, exactly. That's only theoretically correct if every potential buyer has considered what's being offered at auction. We see all the time people seeing auction results and telling us, oh, I wasn't paying enough attention and I definitely would have bid more. And what does that mean for the value of the item?
So last question, if we take a look in the crystal ball, what will happen with the handbags market?
Looking into my handbags crystal ball, I would say, the value of medium to larger size leather bags is going to continue to go up. I think the value of smaller bags is going to stay relatively stable. But I think, overall, we're going to see more new collectors coming into this market looking to buy more of the what I call the basic starter Birkin, and I think values for those are going to continue to go up as well, especially for the ones that are in store fresh condition. I think the areas where we're going to see values coming down in the future, it's hard to say. I think in terms of newer designs like the Kelly and Desordre that I mentioned, as more examples come onto the market, we'll definitely see prices come down. But that's a cycle that we see with every new release of limited editions. So, if you're looking towards the future, I would just say keep an eye out for the latest things, because those are always very exciting. And the numbers that they post are going to be, big at the start and then start to come down. And I think over time, the initial selling prices for limited editions is also going to continue to go up. So, these days, a new limited leather might bring 45 at auction. In the near future, it could easily be bringing 50 or 65.
Okay, we will consider that when we go into Barnaby's or Sotheby's or some other auctions to see what we have. Thanks a lot for participating. And we hope that this market will continue, definitely.
Yes, me too. Thanks so much for having me. It's been good.
To keep up with the latest trends and receive weekly updates on the art and auction world, subscribe to our newsletter on barnabys.com or read Barnaby's magazine online.